Notice how this policeman, in fact striking out at a jubelpurser, becomes the focus for the cameras. We've just indicated a brief cut of our own by a fade to black. But note that the original news editor made cuts without signalling them. Here, as we can deduce in the change in light, from early to late evening. By now, water cannon, the distinctive police weapons which signal open confrontation, have come into play. A police bullet did kill the philology student Benno Ohne. But remember on the first showing, we pointed out 2 apparent shots. So how accurate is this record of what happened? Without necessarily taking sides on the issue, Panorama's treatment undoubtedly brings out in full theatricality the sense of Ohne as the first martyr of German student protest. The poster concludes, "This murder obliges us to fight." The great international student issue of the time was Vietnam, the subject of this 1967 teaching, though the attack was on German politics as well.
Das heißt, wir demonstrieren morgen nicht nur gegen die amerikanischen Barbarei in Vietnam, sondern wir demonstrieren auch gegen einen unfähigen Senat, der sich immer auf diese glorreichen Schutzmächte beruft. Und wir werden zeigen, dass dieser Berliner Senat unfähig sein wird, politische Alternativen, politische Perspektiven zu geben.
The student leader Rudi Dutschke then outlined the tactics for the planned demonstration.
Agitation und systematische Aufklärung in den Nebenstraßen, auf dem Nebengleis, durchführen, Aufklärung über die Situation, den BVG-Schaffenden, den Autofahrern, die Flugblätter in die Autos reinstecken. Das muss getan werden. Wir werden nicht prügeln. Wir haben nie angefangen zu prügeln. Das hat immer die andere Seite getan. Wir werden nicht so dumm sein, das wieder... Aber... Und das sollte den Vertretern der politischen Polizei auch hier heute Abend deutlich gesagt werden. Wenn es zu Übergriffen der Polizei kommt, wir werden es nicht zulassen, dass aus unseren eigenen Reihen Kommilitonen abgeschleppt werden.
This is a demonstration to protest against the shooting and serious wounding of Dutschke by a deranged right-winger the day before. It seems peaceful. Someone has brought their young child along. The fairly neutral commentary explains that the marchers are taking a different route from that agreed with the police, and that they are ignoring police instructions to withdraw. Without that information, the pictures might suggest that violence arises entirely from the unreasonable responses of the police.
Während dieser Zeit war der Verkehr in beiden Richtungen auf dem Kurfürstendamm lahmgelegt.
Most notorious of the student leaders of the time was Fritz Teufel, whose name, by the way, means devil. The camera here picks him out especially, together with a photograph of Dutschke. Much of the essence of 1968 is contained in the extensive teach-ins, sit-ins and debates in which distinguished academics and public figures participated.
Wir leben in einem Land,
Professor Ralph Dahrendorf,
in dem schon allzu lange die Politik zwischen öffentlicher Beschwichtigung und dem Ruf nach der Polizei verschwunden ist.
former Berlin Bürgermeister Alberts,
Wir waren der Meinung und sind weiter der Meinung, auch wenn wir nicht jeden Satz unterstreichen oder teilen, dass alle Teile dieser Bevölkerung die Möglichkeit bekommen müssen, sich zu artikulieren.
the great university demonstrations, being part and parcel of a particular continental European radical tradition, attracted respectful attention and the whole paraphernalia of the media. The basic arguments of the student left were paraded. Against American imperialism in Vietnam, against the consensus in West German politics, against Springer and the right-wing press, against the police and the consumer society, for the urban guerrillas in South America. In Frankfurt, a handful of individuals carried out arson attacks on 2 department stores. They were bringing, they said, the fire of Vietnam to Germany, and also making a direct attack on the consumer society. The only way German television could portray this sudden event was by this valueless combination of stock shots and material filmed after the fires. Within 6 months, a trial was held, for speedy arrests had been made. Gudrun Enslin, Torvald Proll applauding the charismatic Andreas Baader, and Horst Söhnlein. The scene could almost be from a French feature film of life on the Rive Gauche. Just look at these gilded children of the bourgeoisie. Britain, too, seemed to be sharing in the mood of '68. Compare first the British television presentation. We shall see, in contrast to the German practice, a direct on-the-spot reporter with his camera crew providing synchronized sound.
It's going. The police are being pushed backwards. The police are just holding, but they can't hold any more.
Careful with the check. Careful with the check.
They're all down on the floor now.
Until we get up. Get up.
Well, I've just broken through the police lines. The column has just come down the road there. Unfortunately, I've just been hit in the face. The column, I gather, is about a mile long. They pushed through the barrier, but didn't quite make it. There was about 3 lines of policemen, 3 or 4 deep. The police are just about managing to hold it. There's several smoke bombs. They're through. The first are through now. The first are through.
The shots from above were filmed mute, but the gaps were no doubt filled in the news broadcast with studio commentary or generalized sound.
The horses are moving in. They're in. The horses are in now. The horses are moving in now. And they must...
On your backs. Come on your backs.
A horse has tried to hit... They're screaming now. Absolute hysteria. The horses are moving them back now. Since they reached the square, the police haven't as yet drawn truncheons. The only real force the police have shown is with the horses. Now the firecrackers are being thrown at the police horses now. There's a horse down there with, I see, with stain all up his legs. Yes, there's another one right in front of the police horses. But they're standing their ground, they're not backing off.
Do we see in Britain a greater restraint from both demonstrators and police?
Now you can see the banners are being used as clubs. The banners and flags are being hurled at the police, and the horses and the police are being hit with the banners now. Off goes another hat, another policeman's helmet sails through the air.
Well, this is nothing, of course, compared with last week. The police cordon is holding really firm, gently pushing back these crowds into the centre of Whitehall, taking the pressure off the inner cordon on Downing Street itself. 6 demonstrators are being allowed into Downing Street to hand in their petitions at the front door of number 10.
CND falls into a much older British tradition of peaceful demonstration.
Hands off Vietnam! Wilson,
Hands off Vietnam!
Mr. Arley, did you march from Aldermaston this weekend?
No, I just went on the CND march yesterday to try and persuade marchers, some of them at any rate, to march to the German embassy and later to the Springer office in London in solidarity with the German comrades.
Why did you want to do that?
Because the German SDS had been in touch with us for a long time. We have been in touch with them. They invited me to go and speak in West Berlin, which I did. And over the last 2 days, we've been in constant touch with them, and they said that London is the only place which hasn't had demonstrations in solidarity with the German students. There have been demonstrations all over Western Europe except London. And could we do something? So the Vietnam Solidarity Campaign then decided that it could do something. So we marched to the German embassy at 1 o'clock, and later on at 5 p.m. in the afternoon, we marched to the Springer building where we made our protest.
How much violence was involved on those 2 occasions?
Very few. I think even the police will agree that there was very little violence involved. The latest reports I have are that no policeman was injured and about 8 demonstrators were arrested. So I think it's been a very successful day.
British student leaders weren't flattered with batteries of television microphones. If interviewed, it was in the calm environment of the television studio, and Tariq Ali, who wasn't actually British, was the nearest thing to the continental student leader. Fearing violence on the continental scale, the police here are carrying out weapon searches. British universities were certainly centres of radicalism, but how different student activity at the London School of Economics appears from the crowded German teach-ins. How then does this British protest compare with its German counterpart?
Please wait until the demonstration moves out. Assembled in front of the Vietnam Solidarity Committee banner, please move behind.
We have now jumped ahead in time to the early 1970s. A policeman was shot dead on the 22nd of October 1971 by Margaret Schiller. The role of young women in the more violent side of German activism is very striking. Throughout 1970 and 1971, there had been many bank robberies and small incidents of arson. Crimes carried out by young people disillusioned with the failure of the 1968 movements to change society. In May 1972, a number of major explosions took place, including this one at the Bavarian police headquarters at Augsburg. Letters claiming responsibility were received from various groups within the recently named Red Army faction. On the 24th of the month, 2 car bombs driven into the American Army base in Heidelberg resulted in the deaths of 3 soldiers. The Red Army faction claimed it was a protest against genocide in Vietnam. With hindsight, we can see that these events of May 1972 mark the beginning of real political terrorist violence in Germany. But as the events became more dramatic and tragic, the news coverage inevitably appeared late and lame. But lame and late are scarcely the adjectives to describe film of the events which occurred after the police had discovered Baader and his close associate Mainz in a garage in a block of flats in Frankfurt. The police activity had attracted the attention of a television director on his way to watch a world record attempt by a diesel car. As the flats were nearby, the Frankfurt television station's cameras were soon on the scene.
Die einzige Chance ist, dass sie auf der Ehe bleiben. Und die haben sie nur, wenn sie sich unseren Anordnungen beugen.
Mainz surrendered and, on police orders, stripped to his underpants. Baader had to be dragged out, severely bleeding. Even using this fragmentary and intractable type of evidence, we can see clearly differences between Britain and Germany. The personality cults, the intellectualizing behind student protest in Germany, for example. The controlled CND-style marches in Britain. And whatever the apparent convergence in 1968, there can be no doubt that significant protest in the 2 countries was taking very different forms by the early 70s. In both countries, student protest lost its intensity. But disillusioned individuals in Germany kept alive the spirit of protest with a form of political violence which developed into terrorism. And even had the events been the same, the television coverage in the 2 countries would probably have presented them in slightly different ways. For television stations, just as much as political protest movements, are themselves the products of a particular culture.
At the other end, Bruce Grobler described...
Arrested 6 people suspected of being members of the Red Army faction. 4 were already on the police's most wanted list.